Kiddushin Daf Lamed Amud Bet. How to avoid negative thoughts and desires. Im paga bcha mנוול zeh. So we're dealing with the inevitable battle that we have with the yetzer hara. Everybody who's involved in spiritual growth, in avodas Hashem, battles with the yetzer hara. The passion, the desire. If a person is vital, living, passionate, real, imaginative, he's got a strong yetzer hara. Kol hagadol michavero yitzro gadol mimenu. The more alive you are, the more alert you are, the more vital you are, the better your yetzer hara functions. That desire to do wrong, that evil inclination functions. And we get into this conversation then of you mustn't do this, you shouldn't do this, don't do this. And it afflicts all of us, but particularly it afflicts young men who are learning in yeshiva, young men who are on the journey of becoming Talmidei Chachomim and Bnei Torah. And as you'll see as we go, if you know any such men, send them this particular Matmonim. They should listen to it, they should study it. So many New Age psychologists and NLP practitioners argue that when you get into this don't, you shouldn't, you're actually reinforcing the negative because the subconscious can't hear negative. So if you say, don't eat that cookie, what the subconscious hears is, eat that cookie. And that's absolute nonsense. Because if that was so, we would have to rewrite the left-hand side of the Luchot. All the law ta'asehs of the Torah, all the negative instructions of the Torah. The Ribono Shel Olam, the creator of the human subconscious, wouldn't tell us, lo tirtzach, lo tignov, lo taneh b'nei et shaker, wouldn't give it to us all in the negative. If the negative simply reinforced the yetzer hara, the Torah wouldn't do it. So we know that's not true. The subconscious, and there's research to show that the scientific research doesn't bear out this idea that the subconscious can't hear the negative. And it's right, the subconscious can hear the negative. Not only that, but the real problem is that the subconscious hears the negative too well. And that's where the problem comes. And this links into the Matmonim of Daf Chaf Daled Amud Bet, about the things we fear, and we'll touch on it again as we go through it today. So what does the Gemara say? Tanu Rabbanon, kashe yetzer hara she'afilu yotzro korora. Yetzer hara is very, very serious because even he who created it calls it evil. Hashem who made it says, but it's bad. The yetzer hara is bad. That's how bad it is. Omer Rabbi Yitzchak, yitzro shel adam mitchadesh alav b'chol yom. The yetzer hara is not, it never becomes stagnant. It becomes fresh. It's also vital. It renews every day. It's relevant. That's the power of the yetzer hara. V'amar Rabbi Shimon ben Levi. Our Gemara says Rabbi Shimon ben Levi. There's no Rabbi Shimon ben Levi. In the Gemara in Sukkah, the same Gemara appears, and it's Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. And we know that Reish Lakish was a Baal Tshuva. He was a man with a huge yetzer hara, with powerful energy. We know the story with Reish Lakish. And he was a robber. He was a bad guy. So he knows what the yetzer hara is. If there's any expert in yetzer hara and Shas, it's Reish Lakish. And Reish Lakish says, Yitzro shel adam mitgaber alav b'chol yom. It gets stronger and stronger. Don't think the yetzer hara gets weaker. If you're growing as a human being, your yetzer hara gets stronger. Umevakesh hamito, and it wants to kill you. V'ilmale HaKadosh Baruch Hu ozro ein yachol lo. And if it weren't for siyata dishmaya, you can't get ahead of it. So here's a message to this. I mean, I talk about the Musar approach here. I'm not talking about the Rabbi Yisrael Salanta's Musar approach. I'm talking about the people who focus on don't do this and don't do that, and you shouldn't do this, and you'll go to hell if you do this, and terrible punishments will happen to you if you do this. That approach in Torah, we see doesn't work. Says Reish Lakish, without siyata, you'll never beat the yetzer hara. It's not humanly possible. If you're a vital human being and you want to remain alive, if you want to kill your yetzer hara, and then with that you'll kill your passion and you'll kill your desire and your imagination, that's one thing. But if you're going to live as a living human being, you will never kill your yetzer hara. You'll never overcome the yetzer hara. You need siyata dishmaya. Hashem has to help you for that. And then we've got Rabbi Yishmael, the Tanu Debei Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yishmael is interesting. He's got such an approach throughout Shas. Rabbi Yishmael was the Bar Plukta of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai in Brochus Daf Hey, where we talked about V'asafta deganecha, should you only learn Torah, not work? And Rabbi Yishmael said, you've got to live naturally, you've got to live normally. Rabbi Yishmael says, Lo tehei Torah kechoiva alecha. Torah shouldn't be a burden on you. Rabbi Yishmael has this beautiful blended way of living normally, as we would say. And Rabbi Yishmael says, Im pagach b'cha mנוול zeh. So what do you do if the yetzer hara gets you? You davened, but it didn't help. All of a sudden, the yetzer hara is in front of you, and you're about to do something wrong, or you're thinking bad thoughts. What do? Moshchei lebeis hamedrash, open a Gemara, start learning. That's what you do. Don't take him on head on. Don't start saying, don't do this, don't do that. So here we see a bit of an affirmation that the way of dealing with the yetzer hara is not with the musar of don't, and you'll get into trouble if you do, and you'll be punished if you do. This is such relevant Gemara for the first day of our morning slichas, isn't it? As we get into Yomim Noroim. What an amazing piece of Gemara to be learning. What a privilege. No, says the Gemara, don't take it on head on, but not for the reason that the New Age psychologist gives, that the subconscious can't understand a negative. That's not what it is at all. It's something else that is totally different. And what it is the Gemara that we learned on Daf Chaf Daled, where it says, Shani Adam, when it comes to damage, the kivan de bardatu iu mavit nafshe, if you damage somebody by giving them a shock, they've caused their own damage because they chose to be shocked. You'll remember we said fear is a choice. So fear is a choice. And then we had the Beis Halevi who said that Aveira Zu, which is choser bitachon, not having the bitachon to save yourself from the fear, goreim lo lipol. It's the fear which causes the fall. We aren't damaged by the things we fear, you remember we said. We're damaged by the fear itself. So if I say, don't do this, then where does your subconscious go? Why not? Because it's a terrible aveira. And therefore, you're going to get to terrible punishment. Now you're in fear. And if you're in fear, what did we say is the case? The fear causes the fall. That's what it is. The subconscious gets the negative. It amplifies the negative. It magnifies the negative. It terrorizes you with the negative. And the very terror is the cause of the fall. That's why you don't talk in the negative. Not because the subconscious can't understand the negative. That's absurd. And as we learned in the Pasuk in Iyov, Ki pachad pachadati vayetayuni v'asher yagorti yavoli. What I feared happened to me. And we had the Gemara in Brochus, where Yehuda ben Nosson was walking behind Rav Amnuna, and he sighed, he krechts. Rav Amnuna says to him, you're a chator, you're sinning. Do you want Yisurim to come to you? Do you want pain and suffering to come to you? A krechts, a sigh, is not a reaction to suffering. A sigh is a cause of suffering. It attracts suffering. Ki pachad pachadati vayetayani v'asher yagorti yavoli. And he brings that pasuk. Reb Chaim Lifshitz used to teach me in this Gemara. Reb Chaim Lifshitz was not only a Talmud Muvak of Rabbi Chiel Weinberg, the Street Age, he was also a student Muvak of Jean Piaget, the great psychologist, and Reb Lifshitz himself became a great psychologist. And he taught me the idea that yetzer means the creative force. There's a yetzer tov and there's a yetzer ra. But yetzer is the creative force. When the creative force in the human being is not employed productively, it employs itself destructively. It's the desire for aveiro is a desire to connect with something internal. It comes from the void inside, the emptiness we feel inside ourselves, and we want to do something to feel alive. But if you're feeling alive because you're learning, and Rabbi Chaim Lifshitz used to direct people sometimes who couldn't go and learn, they couldn't open a Gemara. And what they used to say is start playing a musical instrument, start painting, start writing, do something creative so that there's this void of creative urge inside you is satisfied in some way or another. And if they had no talent artistically, he told them to do gardening, to go to a kibbutz and work and plant and see things grow, be involved in something creative. Because as the soul becomes involved in positive creativity, it abandons the need for destructive satisfaction of urges. And we see that very, very clearly in this piece of Reb Chaim Volozhin that I've quoted for you. As I said, you'll have to look at the source sheets afterwards because we weren't able to print them out and bring them. Reb Chaim Volozhin talks about, in Keter Rosh, Histaklut arayot v'sichatan amar. What about looking where you shouldn't look, seeing things you shouldn't see, talking about things you shouldn't see? And this is pornography he's talking about. What about being exposed to pornography? זה הכלל, כל מה שיגדור את עצמו ויפרוש מראייה, אחר כך אם יראה ויביט, יבאר בו היצר כאש. Listen to Reb Chaim Volozhin. The more you stop yourself from looking at it, the worse it will be when you happen to see it. All the effort you put, I mustn't, I shouldn't, creates that fear, and then it happens, you see it by mistake, and it does things to you that it otherwise wouldn't do to you. That's not the way to approach it. אלא כשדעתו ללך בשוק יתפלל ויבקש רחמים, לבל ייכשל חס ושלום בשום נדנות חטא והרהור עבירה. All you can do is to mispalel to Hashem that it shouldn't affect you. Of course you shouldn't look at it. Of course you should make an effort not to be exposed to it. But we're living in the kind of world that we are. He was writing this already at the end of the 18th century, early 19th century. And how much worse is it today? You're going to see these things. You need tefillah every day, that it shouldn't affect me negatively. That what I see should not affect me negatively. That's the tefillah. Ilmale HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ezro. If Hashem doesn't help you, you don't have a chance. It's going to affect you in any case. You need tefillah. You need to understand. You need to recognize the danger and be mispalel to Hashem. And he talks about machshava ra'ah gam rishonim lo nitzlu mizeh. Bad thoughts, even the Rishonim, the great people that aren't saved from that. Thoughts come into your mind. You've got to be mesiach da'at. What does mesiach da'at mean? Mesiach da'at doesn't mean stop thinking about it. Mesiach comes from sach. Change the conversation in your mind. You can't stop thinking. You can't create a void in your mind. Change the conversation. Start thinking about things that are positive. Start thinking about things that are creative. Start learning. Change the conversation, and then your mind is channeled into a different direction. Rechannel your thought. Don't stifle the thought. And from there we have a Reb Chaim Volozhiner just a little bit earlier in Keterosh, where he talks about the situation with young men, particularly in yeshiva. It's an issue where masturbation and ejaculation drives them crazy and makes them guilty, and they can't talk to anybody about it, and they don't know what to do about it. And they asked Reb Chaim Volozhiner, and Reb Chaim Volozhiner says he happened to ask the Vilna Gaon, and he says, Kishe osek ba Torah, he says in the Sifrei Musa, they talk about what a terrible thing it is, and it brings death, and that just makes it worse for these young kids, because they don't know what to do about it. They don't know how to hold themselves. And says the Vilna Gaon, if you're in learning, if you're creatively involved with the Rebbeinu Shalom, don't worry about it. It's okay. Just leave it alone. And he showed him in the Zohar of a Sefer Musar, and in the Sifrei Musa, where they treat this so seriously, and the terrible pain and suffering will come to you like death. And the Sifrei Musa say there's nothing to correct except death, and so on. But if you read to the end of the Tikkunei Zohar, you'll see the real beautiful thing that one who understands will see. Shekatav b'tikun kaf aleph. If you're learning Torah, it saves you from death. All those terrible punishments can be avoided because you're applying your mind into a positive creative force to come closer to the Rebbeinu Shalom through Limud HaTorah, through applying your mind into something that is exciting and that is wonderful. And that's why Limud HaTorah has to be exciting. You can't learn Torah in a boring way. If Torah is boring you, you're not learning. If Torah is boring you, it's not Torah. Torah has to excite you. You have to go away and think, oh my goodness, this is amazing. And that occupies your mind during the day. And so if you are exposed to negative thoughts or to negative images, they flow over you. They don't affect you. And the tefillahs that you said in the morning to be saved from that become relevant. And so we have over here in our Gemara the two pieces of advice that we're given. Reish Lakish, who says we need tefillah because only Hashem can save us, and Rabbi Tana Debei Rabbi Shmuel, who says apply yourself to creative thinking, change the conversation, be mesiach das, as the Vilna Gaon and Rabbi Chaim Volozhiner say. Don't take it head on, not because the subconscious doesn't understand the negative. The subconscious understands it and turns the negative into fear. Avoid the fear by engaging yourself in that which is positive and that brings you closer to the Rebbeinu Shalom and an atmosphere of love and connection, which is why in the Ten Commandments, before we come to the Lord's House, says, we're told, Anochi Hashem Elokechem asher hotzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim. I am the God who loves you. I'm the God who brought you out of Mitzrayim. I'm the God who can do anything to save you. If you want to keep your connection with me, don't do these things. If you don't have faith, a Lo Ta'aseh is just a discipline. If you have faith, a Lo Ta'aseh is a way to get closer to the Rebbeinu Shalom who loves you.